and a yoga teacher, and today I'm here to share with you my organic opinion of this lovely book here, 2100 Asanas. So here we go. Alright, my first overall opinion of this book was, wow, that's really big. Back when I didn't have a car, a good friend of mine from yoga teacher training was giving me a ride home, and I noticed it in his car seat. I was like, oh wow, that looks like a good book. And he was like, hey, want to borrow it? And I was like, sure, okay. And it actually ended up coming in really handy. When I accepted it, I was like, oh, that's a really big fancy book. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. And then I've used it for one reason or another. I haven't actually sat down and read it cover to cover, but I can say I picked it up and used it almost every single day since he let me borrow it. And that was like back in like autumn or early winter, so it's been a minute. But what I appreciate about it is that at the beginning of the book, like the actual chapter part, and one reason why I find it really valuable is like it basically goes through like my entire first weekend of yoga teacher training, like everything I learned in those like lectures of the first 3 days of like the like brief history of like modern yoga. It's just kind of like there, so in case I like forget anything, it's like whoop, whoop, I can just flip through and find it. So that's really convenient. One thing that also stuck out at me that wasn't necessarily the most positive impression that I got is like the rest of the pages. I mean, it's really good that there's such an abundance of photographs so you can learn how to do the poses. But when I opened up past like the first couple pages of chapters and like went through all the photographs, it was all just like really young, athletic white people, to be straight up. And like a lot of the poses are not poses that people do every day in yoga class. And I've done a lot of different yoga classes, and I've been practicing yoga for well over a decade and a lot of different studios, and I've seen a lot of crazy poses. And at least like 1/3 of these poses are like poses that normal people, even advanced normal yogis that like teach power every day, they don't do these poses. So if it's somebody that's like coming to yoga really fresh and this is the first book that they pick up, they probably will put it down and then never go to yoga again. So that is like the only negative thing I would say about this book. But other than that, like the fact that it has 2100 poses and like a photograph of every single pose and like a brief description at the bottom that's like really simple. I'm just gonna open it up. Yeah, here we go. Hero pose. That's like a fairly simple-ish one. Try to disregard the freaky one here. Well, I guess but that's the point. You see, it's like a picture and then like a couple of words. But what the words basically say is like the English name, the Sanskrit name, which is really helpful, and then it gives like a little list of like which chakras it activates, if it just like mainly activates 2 or if it activates all of them, or like yeah, it does have modifications. I didn't want to say it had modifications if it didn't, but it does have like suggestions for modifications if you need it. And then my favorite thing that it has that has been so helpful is that it gives your drishti, or your focal point, because that makes such a difference in a yoga pose. If you could have the biggest, strongest muscles and like the most practiced balance or whatever, But if you don't have like a solid focal point to look at and you're like looking all over the place, your pose isn't gonna work out. So there are certain poses that I just couldn't get the hang of, and I was like, why can't I get the hang of this? Like, I've been practicing yoga long enough, I should be able to do it. And it was just as simple as like me not knowing where my drishti was, but like opening up the book and being like, oh, your drishti should be your thumbs, you should look at both of your thumbs. And I'm like, oh, let me try that. Made a huge difference. So that was really great. So I would say, let's see if there's anything else. It's a pretty simple book, so there's not a lot to say about it. It's definitely an open up and practice book. But I would say who it's good for and who it's not the best for. Who it's really great for would be anybody who's in yoga teacher training. It would actually be pretty helpful. Or anybody who's just trying to like deepen their personal practice. But anybody who it probably wouldn't serve the best would be just somebody who practices yoga occasionally, or is just like brand new to yoga, because it might be a little intimidating if you're brand new. So I would say like find a gentler book. I wish I could give you a suggestion off the top of my head, but yeah, basically anything would be more gentle than this. Yamas and niyamas would be a lot better option. There's no photographs of yoga poses in that one, but it is a lot gentler than this. But that's not the point. The point is this book and all the good things about this book, and that basically the main good thing is that it's pretty informative. So I think I'm gonna leave it there before I ramble on too much. So thank you. I appreciate your coming along this little chat with me about this book, and if you're interested in it, I will put the link below for the Amazon. And yeah, that's it. Happy yoga. Namaste. So I just wanted to quickly come back and mention that I just remembered my real first opinion when I saw the book. I said out loud, hey, wow, Kevin, that looks like a cool book. But my internal opinion was like, what the f***? That's probably some crazy ass book about like yoga poses that twist you into a pretzel, and like that person is doing the most extreme triangle pose I've ever seen. Oh my gosh, I don't even like triangle pose that much, especially when it's that extreme. Like, no, just no.